Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create web apps using only Python. So on the back end, I'll have Python. On the front end, I'll have Python. And to access the database, I'll be using Python. So I won't have anything like JavaScript or SQL. It's going to be all Python. And to do this, I'll be using a tool called Anvil. And this video is sponsored by Anvil, so I want to thank them. And if you want to try out Anvil for yourself, there's a link in the description below where you can check it out. It should only take you about 30 minutes or so to learn enough to build something that's actually quite significant because it's so easy to use and it's only Python, so you don't have to worry about any other language. So to demonstrate Anvil in this video, I'm going to build this app. And what this app does is it returns a list of jobs from this Remotive API. So this is just an API that has remote jobs. And I'm going to display those. I'll have a link to each job and I'll have the ability to save a job. So for instance, if I want to save this infrastructure engineer, I'll just click on this button to save. And this is a front end action. And I'll go over to save jobs. And it will show me that I save infrastructure engineer. So I was able to add this particular thing to the database and display it here on the front end. So this is kind of like a single page app. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm not changing endpoints. I'm just changing views. So it's kind of like a single page app in that sense, but I didn't have to write any JavaScript at all. This is only Python. So like I said, I'm going to build this app and let's get right into building it. To begin, this is what you'll see right after you log into Anvil. So the first thing I want to do is go over here to new blank app. I'll click it and then I have options for the style. I'll click material design, but you can choose something else or you can even write your own custom HTML. Next, I'll have the place where I can actually build the app. So on the left-hand side, these things deal with the code of the app. And on the right-hand side, this deals with the visual elements or the components that can go into the app. And then here in the middle, I have the resulting look of the app once everything is done. And I can click on this here and I have the code for this. So this here, what I'm looking at is for the front end. So the code here that I just tabbed over to is front end code, but it's written in only Python. There's no JavaScript involved here. So what I want to do is I want to modify this nav bar here to have the title of my app. So I'm going to call this remote job. So what I'll do is over here, I'll select headline. I'll just hold it and drag it over to drop title here. And now I have a headline component right there. And what I can do is I can modify the properties of that. And I want to modify the text property. So I'll just change this to remote jobs. And now when I run the app, so I'll click run and I'll give this a name of remote jobs. I see this nav bar with the title that I want. So of course, everything else is blank because I haven't added anything yet, but we can see how once you add a component, it immediately is reflected in your app. So this entire thing here is called a form, and this is what I'll be building throughout this video for this app. So I'll have two forms actually, one for the latest jobs that you saw earlier, and then one for the saved jobs, and I'll be able to go between them. And it's a front end change, so I'm not actually going to like a different endpoint or a URL when I'll change between them. It's just a front end visual change. It's like a single page app kind of change. So what I want to do is I want to get the list of the latest jobs from the API. So before I can do that, I need to think about the structure of the data when it gets returned. And basically what I want is I want a table and each row is going to have the information for one job. So you can do that in Anvil and they have a component called data grid. So I'll just drag that over and we see here I have a table and the table has 3 columns. And over here in the properties, I can modify those columns. So for the first one, I'll have title for the job title. The second one, I'll have company name. And for the third one, I'll have the URL for that particular job. And I can even add another one. I'll call this save because I want to be able to save each job as you saw in the demo at the beginning of the video. So what I want to do next is I want to modify these keys because when I pass some data to the structure, which I'll show you in just a moment, what it's going to do is it's going to take a list of things. And for each thing, it's going to look for a particular key and display that inside of the element itself. So for instance, for title, I want to have a key called title because that's what's in the API. And then for company name, it's going to be company_name. And then finally for the URL, it's going to be URL. And then for save, I don't actually need anything because it's not something that comes from the data. It's just a field where I can click something and save. So for the save, what I'll do is I'll add a button. So up here we see I have a button. I'll just take that and I'll drag it over to save. And actually I need to double click on this first so it highlights the row. So I'm now editing what each row means, but remember this is repeated. So I'll drag the button over, and over here for the text, I'll just change this to a plus for a save button. So now that I have all that, I want to write some code to get the data from the API and then display it here. So let me go over to the code section. So I'll highlight the entire form again, and I'll go over to code. And here we see the code for this particular form. So this is front-end code, but I'm only going to write Python. I don't need to write any JavaScript to make this work. And if I look over here on the right-hand side, I have the different things that are available to me from what I added visually. So here I have this repeating panel, and this is what I want to update. So this repeating panel is going to hold all of the items that I returned from the API. So basically, if I do self.repeatingpanel1.items, that references the items that will eventually build that table that I've added. So I'll start by adding that. So self, and let me make sure it's indented properly, self repeating panel 1.items. And the nice thing about Anvil is the autocomplete is really good because everything is integrated. Like, it's not only just guessing what you want to type, but it kind of knows what your options are based on how Anvil works. So the autocomplete is very useful. So I'm going to set these items to something, but before I can set them to something, I need to get them. So I'm going to call an API to get the jobs, and then I'm going to set the items to that list of jobs that I get in return. So to do that, I'll go over to the API. So this is just a GET request. There's no authentication or anything. I can just take the URL and copy it. And what I'll do is I'll use the built-in HTTP library to make a request to this API. So to do that in Anvil, I'll type http://request. And then in here, I can just pass a URL. And because this is JSON, I'll set JSON equals to true. And what I'll do is I'll also get the jobs out of here. So there is a key in here for the actual list of jobs. So what I'll do is just add jobs there. And then at the beginning, I'll create a variable called jobs. So jobs equals http://request, and then the link with JSON equals true. And then I'm just getting the jobs out of that. And this Python list can then be set to the items here. So this HTTP comes from Anvil, so I'm just importing it because I have star here, which was given to me from the beginning. I can just reference it here, or you can do anvil.http://request. So now that I have that, let's see what happens. I really didn't do much, but let's see if I'm getting some result. So let me click run. And it loads, and we see I have the jobs already. So I have my column headers, so title, company name, URL, and save. And then I have the actual data from the API. So the job title, the company name, and the URL. And if I go down here, I even can paginate through these things. And because I have 100, I can go through quite a few pages before I reach the end. So it only took 2 lines of code to bring in the data into my app and display it, which is pretty convenient and pretty quick. And basically, for a lot of things in Anvil, it's really this simple. Like, once you know how Anvil works, it doesn't take much code to get things to work, and you'll save a ton of time over writing this with all Python and all JavaScript as you would in a normal app. So let's go back to the design and note how the URL here was just text. What I want this to be is an actual link. So if I double click on here again, I can then modify each individual row. And for the URL, instead of having it just be text, I want it to be a link. So I'll take this link element and drag it over to URL. And then over here, I can then set the properties, but I don't necessarily need to set the property because it won't be the same for each one. What I need to do is I need to set the data binding. So if I click add here, what I'll do is I'll be able to set the data that is associated with this row to this here link. and I'm going to have an item. So just remember, I'm looping over a bunch of things. I have this list of items from the API. So each individual item is going to be here, and I can get something out of it by referencing it by the key. So for the text, I'm going to get self.item URL. And then also I want to have a data binding for the URL itself. So for a link, you have the actual text of the link, and then you have the URL that the link points to. So I need to modify them both, but from the API, they're going to be the same thing. So self.item.url. And now when I run the app, I should see something different. I now see that these are links. So if I click on one, then I can see the actual Remotive page for that particular job. So now let's get this saved to work. So getting a save to work is a little more involved because I need a database for this. So if I want to save a job to the database, I need a database in the first place. And to create a database in Anvil is pretty easy. So if I go over here to the left-hand side, I see this label called services. And if I just add something by clicking on add a new service here. So you see here, I have a list of services I can add. For my purpose, I need a data table, which is a database, but I have things like users, emails, a Google API, or even Stripe. But I'll click data tables. And then this allows me to create a table. So I'll click add a table, create new table. And then I can add the columns for that table. So first I'll give it a name. I'll just call this jobs. And then I'll click new column. And then I can select the data type. This is just going to be text. So it's going to have a title. I'll add another one for the company name. And this should be something for the database. So I'll just make it lowercase. Let me modify this one to be lowercase as well. And then for the URL, it will just be URL. So these actually match the keys in my list of items. And I'm doing that intentionally to save on typing. So you'll see how I do that in a moment. But now that I have that, what I want to do is I want to be able to save the information for each particular row to the database. So the database can't be accessed from the front end directly. What I need to do is I need to create something on the server side, the backend, to handle this. Well, of course, this is going to be Python as well. And what I can do is I can go over to server code here and click remote jobs. And then it gives me options to add a new server module or a package. I want a module, so I'll just click that. And it has some sample code. And underneath the sample code is where I'll add my stuff. So what I want to do is I want to add some code to save something to the database, right? So I'm just going to create a function. I'll call it save job. And this save job is going to take in some item, right? So because this is Python on both the backend and the front end, it's really easy to pass Python objects from the front end to the backend. Normally with JavaScript, you have to change your JavaScript data structures to something generic so it can be sent over an HTTP request. And then you have to parse that on the Python side, and then you can handle it. But because I'm using Python on both sides and everything is integrated, I can pass Python objects to and from the backend. So here, I'm going to pass an item, which is going to be a Python object. And what I want to do is I just want to save that to the database. So if I look up here on line 3, I have this app tables import that will allow me to access my tables. So I just go to app tables. .jobs, so the job table that I have, and then I want to add a row. And then in here, I can add the things that I want. So I want to add the title. I want to add the company name. And I want to add the URL. And because this item that I passed here is a Python object, I can just do item title, and I can do the same thing for company name. So item company name and item URL. So these three things will be saved into my data table here. And it looks like it changed the name back to column 1. I just changed that to company name so it works properly. There we go. So I have those three. And once I call this, it will simply add a row to my database. So the way I call this from the front end is I need to add a decorator here, anvil.server.callable, and this will allow me to call it from the front end. So now if I go over to my form again, what I want to do is I want to have some kind of action when I press this button. So let me highlight this again. And if I just double click this here, it gives me a method that allows me to do something when that button is clicked. And the thing I want to do when that button is clicked is simply pass the item to the server so it will save it. So to do that here, I'll just remove this pass. So what I'll do is I'll use anvil.server.call, and this will allow me to call any of the functions that I have on my server. Save job is one. So the first argument here is going to be the name of the function as a string, and the second argument is going to be the data. So if I just do self.item, that is going to pass the item to the server. And remember, this is a Python object. And even though this is the front end, I can pass that Python object directly to the back end. So even though I'm making a server call, I can still pass the Python item and Anvil will handle everything for me. So now that I have that, let's try this out. So I added this and let's see if clicking on the button works. So let me try adding the senior front-end engineer. I'll click this. And then I'll also go to DevOps Senior and I'll click that. So it doesn't give me any kind of confirmation that it's saved because I didn't add one, but I can do that in a moment. So I'll stop. I'll go over to my data table again. And now we see here, I have those two jobs that I just added, the senior front-end engineer and the DevOps Senior. So you can see by just adding that little bit of code, I was able to save something to the database. And if I go back over here to the template, what I'll do is I'll just print a job saved, or actually I want to alert. So this is front end. I want to visually display this to the user. So I'll alert job saved. I'll run this and I'll try adding another job just to see if it's saved. So let's try data scientist. And now it says job saved. Right, and if I go back over to the data tables, we'll see that I have the third job here, data scientist. So now I've added my first form where I can see the jobs. Now I want to add a second one so I can see all the saved ones I have. So let me go over here and just click the plus, add new file, and I want to add a form and just standard page. And what I'll do is I'll just drop the same element here. And for this one, I'm going to call this saved jobs. And for the link, I want to have a link between these two pages. So what I'll do is I'll add a button and I'll just drag it over here to links. And for the text on this one, I'll call this latest jobs, and I can't see it because of the color. So what I'll do is I'll remove this and I can easily undo with Control Z, and I'll just add a link. How about that? And I still have the button here, so I'll just delete it. And for the link, for the text, I'll say latest jobs. And then I'll have the same kind of link here. So I'll drag a link over. And I'll call this one saved jobs. So to make this link work, what I can do is I can just double click it. And it opens up the code editor again. And then I can do something when I click the link. So all I want to do here is open form. So open form, form 2. So that's my other form. I can give them different names, but I'll just use form 1 and 2. So when I click on the link, open form, form 2. And then for form 2 over here, I'll double click this. So it brings me the code here. And then I'll do the same thing, open form, but form 1. So let me try running this. And now if I click save jobs here, it opens up a new page. It's blank because I haven't added anything yet. If I click latest jobs, it will take me back to the home page. So I'll stop that. And now I want to bring in that same list. So I'll just do the same thing as I did before. I'll copy in the data grid. I'll modify the columns. So I'll have title, and then I need to modify the key as well. So title there. And then I'll have the company name. So company name. And then I need the key for company name. And then for the third one, I have URL, and the key will be URL. And then I don't need a save one because I'm not saving my save jobs. I could add another one for removing, but to keep this video short, I won't add that. But just know it follows the same kind of pattern as the save one. It's just kind of doing things in a different direction. So now that I have that, remember for the URL, so let me double click this. The URL, I have a link. And if I go down here, I need some data binding for the link. So the text will be the URL, and the actual URL itself is going to be URL. And now what I need to do is I need to get the saved items. So this is something that I need to do on the server as well. So if I go over to the server module, I can create another callable. So I'll decorate this as callable, and I'll create another function, and I'll call this get saved jobs, and it doesn't take in any arguments. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to return app tables.jobs.search. And I don't need any kind of filters, so I just want to get everything. But this will allow me to take all the data that is in that jobs table and return it from this function. So on the front end, I can call that. So let me go over to the code. And up here in the dunder init, what I want to do is I want to call that. So I'll use anvil.server.call. And I'm going to call get save jobs. There are no arguments, so I don't have to pass anything there. And I'll just call this jobs. And then next, I have that repeating panel. So I'll do self.repeatingpanel1.items equals jobs. And that should allow me to get all the save jobs I have and have them displayed. So I'll run this again. And we see I have the latest jobs. And if I click on save jobs, now I can see my save jobs, and it was that easy to add. So I have the 3 save jobs here. Let me go back to latest jobs and I'll add a couple. So let's say technical writer, job saved, and I'll find another one. Let's say product manager, and I'll add one more data engineer. So I added those 3. If I click on save jobs again, I see I have 3 added jobs to my list. And of course I can see the URLs as well and click on them if I want. So you can see here in less than 20 minutes, I was able to build an app that would probably have taken me much longer to build if I were just using Python and JavaScript in a regular way in some kind of web framework. But by using Anvil, I was able to dramatically reduce the time that it took for me to build this app. And in addition to being quick and easy to build, the app is also quick and easy to publish. So I can go to this publish this app link in the upper right-hand corner here. I have the option to use a private link. So if I wanted to share my app with an individual, I could, and they can just take this link and they'll be able to see and use my app. Or if I wanted to have a public link for anyone to use my app, I can use the name generated here. I can even change the name. So prettyprinted.anvil.app, apply. And then I can open it and then use the app here. And I can even have a custom domain on their other plan if I wanted to have that as well. So it's very easy to publish. It only takes a moment, and anyone can use your app that you just built in Anvil. So that's it for this demo. Once again, I want to thank Anvil for sponsoring this video. Like I said, if you want to check Anvil out yourself, just go to the description below and click on the link, and you'll be able to sign up for Anvil and create your own apps. It's really easy to use, and it shouldn't take you long to at least get familiar with it, so you can try building something and kind of compare it to how long it takes you to build something in like Django or Flask, for instance. So if you have any questions about using Anvil, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.